Hi everybody, welcome along to this month's episode of Left Foot Live. It's great to be back with you again. What you couldn't see in the background there was I suddenly, literally with 15 seconds to go, looked over and realised that my microphone was plugged into the wrong channel on the mixer. So I was hurriedly leaning over the desk, rushing to put everything back in place. First of all, I have to start with an apology before I do anything else, and that is I have to say sorry because I got the wrong date when I set up this month, today's Left Foot Live live stream. And I just realised, I only realised this morning, about 20 minutes ago, in fact, that the date that I'd set it up for was yesterday. So I don't know what happened there, but there was a bit of a snafu. So apologies for anyone who was waiting around yesterday and thinking, my gosh, where is this guy? What a slacker. Lame. I turn up for bad live stream entertainment and he's not even here to give me bad live stream entertainment. So apologies for that. Yes, so it's good to be back. This is the Left Foot Live show for those who maybe are new here or who are going to watch this later, and this is the first one you've watched. We do these once a month. So the first Friday of each month, basically, we do a Left Foot Live. And this is the show where I talk about entertainment, movies, TV, and related topics. So all sorts of wholesome amusements, basically, that make the world a better place, and some that don't, and we'll get my critique. There's lots to talk about this month. I've actually seen a few things. I finally caught up on a few TV series and one or two movies that I thought were worthy of conversation, just to let you know my thoughts on. Before I do that, though, don't forget we also have a show called Monday Night Live that happens once a month. The next episode is coming up on Monday the 13th of June. That's a show, panel show, where we talk about politics and current affairs and stuff like that. And I have two co-hosts with me, or two guests with me. I have a guy called Elliot O'Kelly, who's a commentator here in New Zealand, and Simon O'Connor, who is a national MP, an opposition party MP in our parliament here in New Zealand. And so if you're interested in that sort of stuff, then make sure you tune in for that as well. Thank you, a huge thank you to all of the patrons of the channel who are helping to support Left Foot Media. You guys are awesome. If you're not a patron, you can do that at patreon.com/Left Foot Media. As little as $1 a month is all it takes, or as much as you want to contribute. If you contribute $5 or more per month, that's $5 New Zealand, so that's even cheaper overseas, then you get access to a free weekly episode of the Dispatches podcast. That's a current affairs podcast that I put out every single week just for our patrons. And to give you an idea of how much content you get in that podcast is about 2 to 2.5 hours long every single week. So quite meaty sort of content. So if you're interested in sort of current affairs, philosophy, cultural critique, stuff like that, that's where that happens, and you get free access to that by becoming a patron with $5 or more per month. Alternately, you can make a one-off contribution, leave a tip in the tip jar. I've got two ways of doing that. There's a PayPal link. If you go to my homepage of my YouTube channel, at the top right, you'll find a PayPal link, and also there's a coffee link in the video description for this episode. And you can do it that way. That also comes to my PayPal, but they obviously take a little bit more of the cream off the top along the way. Don't forget to please subscribe. If you're not a subscriber to the channel, hit subscribe, hit that little notifications bell. It seems like the song that everyone is singing on YouTube these days, but please do that if you're not a subscriber here, and you'll get access to all the content that we've got on offer, and you'll get notifications about it as soon as, well, hopefully you'll get notifications about it as soon as it goes to air. And don't forget today with this video, please make sure that you hit that, smash that like, as all the cool kids say. Smash that like button. But please hit that like button. That really helps the channel and the algorithm with the old YouTubes. So yeah, I'd really, really appreciate it if you did that as well. Plenty of likes. Helps along the way. One last thing before I jump into today's topics of conversation, because I've got so much I want to talk about, and then I want to get to your questions. We're going to try and get today's episode tight and compact, but I know it's going to spiral out of control. But there's so much to talk about. Before I jump into that, though, I have to say this. This is a huge spoiler alert. There's going to be spoilers in today's episode. So there's so much we're talking about in today's episode. I'll just give you an idea of what we're covering today. I'm going to get to Taika Waititi and is he the right fit for Star Wars? I want to talk about that. But before we get there, I want to talk about 1883, the TV series. Uncut Gems, I finally watched that. The Contractor, the new Chris Pine, Ben Foster film. Mayor of Kingstown, the new TV series. Phenomenal TV series. I want to talk about that. The Invisible Pilot, HBO documentary series. The Pentaverate, Mike Myers is back. SuperNature, Ricky Gervais and the response to that, Severance TV series, and The Northman. I want to talk about The Northman. Watched The Northman the other night, and I thought it was worthy of some conversation. But spoiler alert, plus album of the month as well. I've actually got the album with me. I actually brought it into the office/studio with me last month. You remember I was supposed to talk about this album, and I completely forgot to bring it into the room with me. So I thought, no, part of the experience is seeing the album cover. And if the album cover ain't here, there ain't no experience, Brendan. So I've actually got the album cover with me. And then, of course, we will open up the floor for your questions. So please feel free to comment, to chime in at any time, and we'll have a good conversation along the way. And if you're watching this later, after the fact, I hope you enjoy the interaction as well. Obviously, you can't stick your comments on live, but you can chuck them in the comment section. Let me know what your thoughts are about everything we talk about today. Right, so spoiler alert. If you don't want any of that stuff spoiled, stop, go home, make a cup of tea, visit your nana, whatever you have to do. But be warned, there's going to be some spoilers, possibly, I think, for some of the stuff along the way. Some not, but some there will be. So let's jump into it. First cab off the rank is the 1883 TV series. I don't know if anybody else has seen this. This is the Taylor Sheridan prequel to Yellowstone. And Yellowstone's a great series, isn't it? And 1883, prequel set in the pioneering west of America. Basically, yet again, Taylor Sheridan is proving how good a writer he is. This one I didn't like as much, I have to be honest with you. I like things about this better than I did certain things about Yellowstone. I feel that the latest season of Yellowstone was sort of meandering a little bit. So it started off really tight and really strong and really tense. And it sort of felt like after season 2, it sort of started to get a little bit like it was repeating the same concept each series, which is, the family is under threat and there's some person or thing who wants to take over or do harm to the family. And so it was, this season I felt was a little bit meandering. Still not bad. It's a good show, great show. I often say to my friends who haven't seen it, it's like Downton Abbey for men. So it's a family on a family estate, and it's the history and the dynasty of this family played out in the real world, like Downton Abbey, but for men. No offense to any blokes out there who watch and enjoy Downton Abbey. I don't enjoy it. I've never watched. I watched briefly, tried to watch it, but not for me. My wife loves it, not for me. But 1883 is the prequel set in the pioneering West. It's sort of the origins of the family story, how they came to be on the plot of land that they're on in the Yellowstone series. There are some things about this show that I didn't like, though. There's a great Western feel to it. I like Westerns. I think it's a reasonably well-written Western, but there are some little things. There's some retelling of history going on here. It's a quirk of anything like this today that is written retrospectively about the past that tends to be big budget and get attraction, is that it tends to insert modern mores, modern thinking, modern morality, modern critiques on the past, and often it doesn't treat its characters, its protagonists, or its antagonists, its players in that period of history fairly, and that's a general problem today. And there's a little bit of this, I think, in this one, where it's sort of looking back through this lens of how would a person living today critique the behaviour and then of that previous era. And what it does is it inserts into its protagonists, it inserts the modern critique. So they're thinking like a modern person would, which they wouldn't do. And so there's a little bit of that. That was a little bit frustrating. The female character, I can't remember the lead female character's name, but I tell you what, I found her narration frustrating at times. It feels like there's too much of it. And I like this series. I do like this, but I felt that her constant narrating, like a Western noir, it just got a little bit too much at times. It was like, yeah, we don't need it. There's times it's really beautiful and on point, and then other times it's like, oh, she's back again to narrate again and tell us her feelings again, and it's like, it's too much. And what that meant was that in places it was a little bit more of a soap opera than a drama, a Western drama, and it in places just got a little bit soap opera-y. But overall, I think I'd say this series is one that redeems itself. So by the end, this series is, I think it's good. It's a pretty good, solid series overall. So that's 1883. If you haven't seen it, I think it's worth a watch. And if you enjoy Westerns, I'd imagine you'll probably enjoy it. If you're a classic Westerns person, you might find aspects of it a little bit frustrating. We own this city. Next Uber off the queue. We own this city. I don't know if you've seen this. This is the HBO TV series with John Bernthal in it. He's the main character. It's a true story or a telling of, I don't know, I think everything in it is true. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think it's based on. I think it's a true series. HBO TV series about police corruption in Baltimore, isn't it? Baltimore? Yeah. In my mind, I'm saying Brooklyn, but it's not Brooklyn, it's Baltimore. I would have to say I watched this show, We Own This City, with great anticipation. So you got a good lead actor and some good competent actors around him, and it was good to see some faces from yesteryear who are back. And so you've also got David Simon writing this. David Simon of The Wire. Like The Wire is like, the consummate HBO TV series, right? It's right up there. Probably for television aficionados, they would say it's a duel between The Sopranos and The Wire for which one had the better writing and which one really brought us into the modern television era where TV could be better than or a more complete experience than a film. So watching the silver screen, so the television experience could be better than that of going to the movies. And this David Simon's involved in this, but despite that fact, it is frustratingly paper thin. It's bizarre. It's not up to the standard of The Wire. It has its moments, but I don't know what it is. There's some average acting in places too. Some of the characters in their acting, the secondary characters in their acting, it's like, one character I'm thinking in particular was at times you sort of like he didn't feel particularly enthused about being there. There's another female character in it and it's not just her, but there were other actors around her as well. There were early on in particular, they had sort of big chunks of dialogue, and I'm watching this and it's like, gosh, this doesn't feel well directed or well acted. And I remember thinking at times, is this the best take that they could get to put into the TV series? And you've got strange things too, like the final episode comes to a rather crashing halt, basically. It really does feel like either they didn't know how to end this series with the final episode, or they ran out of budget or they ran out of time. So they were told, look, you've got to wrap this up quickly. Just get this thing wrapped up and let's get the hell out of here. It feels like that. Like you've got a courtroom scene in the final 7 or 8 minutes of the final episode where you've got two main characters who sit in the court gallery, so observing a trial, talking at full volume, which straight away I remember thinking that the judge would probably boot these people out of the trial as the reason they're doing it is because they're delivering exposition. There's this rushed exposition that they spend a couple of minutes, I think, in the end, delivering exposition, telling us, well, of course, when certain character went to jail, that changed everything. And I'm like, why didn't you show us that? It was just, honestly, it felt really rushed, and the whole thing sort of just literally came to it's like this television series that had a sort of slow burn type vibe, that all of a sudden became a sprint in the final 20 minutes of the final episode, which felt strange. As I said, maybe they were rushed, I don't know. John Bernthal is the standout in this. He's surrounded by some other good actors too, but he's the main character, and he really is the standout. Jon Bernthal's he's a good, solid actor, right? He's a good, solid journeyman, and in this, he's no exception. He really does bring good acting chops to this. He throws himself into this role, and the physicality of it as well, the accent he puts on. Yeah, he's good in this, and he's the standout. But unfortunately, some of the actors and acting around him is not as good as that at all. And basically what you've got is a story that tells a series of incidents that happened, true incidents, and then the sort of prosecutorial follow-up. So basically, the story centers around Jon Bernthal, who's the main character, being prosecuted for corrupt and immoral police behaviours. And so what you have present day, where the whole prosecution is unfolding and they're interviewing witnesses telling stories about his behaviour and people who were involved, other police officers. And then they're not flashbacks because they form a big part of the series, and they go back in time, they jump back to show you events and behaviours that he engaged in when he was policing. So it's back and forth. There was a little bit, at times it was a little bit confusing, the back and forth, because for some reason, I don't know why, but for whatever reason, they chose to adopt a method of showing you the back and forth by bringing up a screen which looks like basically a police incident report of some kind, or maybe what you'd see on a police laptop or on a police form, where they fill out all the details, and it would enter details. Details would appear on the screen, and then they would jump back to that scene. Now, that would be okay, but it was just, there was so much stuff, so much clutter on the screen that it got a little bit confusing, and it wasn't the most helpful thing. Normally what would they do in a series like this? The screen would go black, or there would be some establishing shot, and then you would have a simple bit of white text that would appear on the bottom center of the screen or somewhere on the screen to tell you what time period it was and where you were, right? This one had a whole police incident report. I mean, clever idea, kind of, but if you're doing making a school documentary, maybe, but in a TV series, it wasn't that helpful, really. There was the other thing too I found was that there wasn't really any meaningful engagement with these characters. So you saw their actions and their behaviours, but it just didn't go much deeper than that. You didn't see much of these people. They have relationships in this series. In fact, Jon Bernthal has a very important relationship with a particular character who's helping him to fence stolen drugs. But there's not really much of a strong establishing of that relationship. You see scenes where they're interacting and sort of working together, but there's not much of a background and not much in the way of establishing the depth of that relationship or who they were to each other or any of that kind of stuff. It felt like a lot of the meaningful stuff you would normally get in a series is missing. And so what happens as the end result is when, a big spoiler alert here, when Jon Bernthal ends up in prison at the very end of the series, and having these flashbacks about what a wonderful career and all the the potential and what an amazing officer he could have been if only. And then they flash back to him in prison, and he's like just him alone walking in a prison yard, and that should really impact you, but it doesn't, because you're like, I don't really know this guy outside of a series of bad events that he engaged in, so I don't care about him. So if you're trying to convince me that I should feel sympathy for him or feel this great impact of his loss, I don't feel it, because you never really, I just don't feel like they treated him fairly as a character. And what I mean by that is it's not the only one, but there's no attempt, I don't think, to really treat him and other characters as complicated characters who actually have like families and histories and personal motivations that lead them astray. Because in these contexts, generally speaking, people aren't psychopaths. Some are, but most aren't. What happens is they get corrupted and they try and justify in their mind their behavior. And it's a very complicated thing. And there's all this important stuff that gives a sense to this character. And so normally a series would treat them a bit more fairly if it's well written. They're not just caricatures. But this one just felt a little bit caricature-y. in places. And this is the bizarre thing. This is David Simon who's writing this, of The Wire, of Tray Me. This guy, he can write and he can do all these things. But in this show, man, I'd have to say it's pretty average. Pretty average experience. I sort of struggle to understand why it's got such a high rating on IMDb. Next cab off the ranks. Carista says, is it just me or does anyone else think that Taika Waititi is kind of overrated? I feel it's as if his humour is all the same. Good point. We're going to talk about Taika Waititi in a moment. That's sort of the big topic of today's show. Taika Waititi in Star Wars. Is he a good fit? Before we get there, though, Uncut Gems. I finally watched Uncut Gems. It's been a while, but I finally watched it. A lot of people I know were saying, you should watch this Uncut Gems. It's amazing. I understand the hype. I do understand the hype. I'm kind of surprised that people were surprised that Adam Sandler, can act beyond just playing comedic characters. There is still, though, in this role, it's not like something like, say, Punch Drunk Love, where it was quite a different role for him. There is still in this character some clear moments of Adam Sandler. But yeah, I understand the hype. This good independent film with a rather stunning conclusion. I would call it overall, though, a bit of a frustrating experience. The moral in the story in this movie is really sound. It's a very good one. And that effectively is that there are no shortcuts. There are no easy way outs. That gambling is not a beneficial and positive thing. It's a risky endeavor. When you win, it's pure luck. And so the morality tale in it I thought is good, but it's a frustrating experience still, nonetheless, because you're like, oh, what? You're sort of hoping for something else, but it was a rather sudden halt to the proceedings. And look, it's well done. It's I get it. I probably wouldn't watch it again. I don't know if I'd recommend it to anybody. But I understand why people, particularly at the time it got released, there was, there wasn't, if I remember things correctly, there wasn't much in the way of positive or glorious sort of cinematic fare. It was, the movies were sort of dominated by superheroes and stuff like that, weren't they? Speaking of movies that I enjoyed, I watched The Contractor. I think this is an Amazon exclusive, isn't it? The Contractor. The film starring Ben Foster and Chris Pine. I quite like this. I would recommend this to people. It was an enjoyable film. Pine actually wasn't his typical sort of characterization in this movie, and I quite like that. So it's not Chris Pine playing Chris Pine, which I've noticed can happen in a lot of the roles that he has. But even was it Jack Ryan? Did he play a Jack Ryan? I'm pretty sure he did. What was that film he was in? Was it a Tom Clancy movie? No, or was it? I'm trying to think what he was in, where he was a spy operative. I can't even remember the film now. I'm pretty sure it was a Jack Ryan movie, wasn't it? But even that was still sort of Chris Pine doing Chris Pine. This film, The Contractor, it's not Chris Pine doing Chris Pine. Ben Foster is good as well, and Ben Foster wasn't doing typical Ben Foster. So often Ben Foster is the guy you think's the good guy, but he's really the bad guy, or he is the bad guy, right? And this one, he wasn't that, and that was good. I thought it was going to play out like that, but it didn't really play out like that at all. This is a film that has and I'll tell you why I like this, is it has a strong European sensibility to it. Tariq Salah, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, he's a Swedish director, and it shows. This film has a European, so if you've watched European spy thrillers, action movies, you'll know what I mean. It has that sort of sensibility to it. There's some great action set pieces, some really good action set pieces, in fact. And I thought it was a good, solid film, good, solid performer. If you haven't watched The Contractor, I would recommend it. It's nothing that you're going to say, oh wow, this is amazing, I haven't seen this sort of action film before, or the acting was off the charts, or the story's pretty straightforward. Kiefer Sutherland's in it as well. Has a secondary part in it, quite and plays his part well. Good story, good film. I think it's what you want in a movie, and I enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it. So that's The Contractor. Something that I absolutely love is the new television series, and I stumbled across this by accident last weekend. It was a bit of a rainy weekend, couldn't do all the yard work and DIY stuff I wanted to do around the home, so sat down, had a few spare hours, and I stumbled across Mayor of Kingstown, this new again Taylor Sheridan, another Taylor Sheridan production, and it is phenomenal. It's a TV series. It's on Amazon. Well, that's where I watched it. And it's effectively, it's kind of like a crime thriller, really, a mob movie in a sense, but it's not a mob film. He is, Jeremy Renner is the main character. He is phenomenal in this, great acting. He's really good, perfect casting for this part. And Jeremy Renner is this kind of Mr. Fix-It guy. So in Kingstown, they've got multiple prisons. He's the guy who works for himself, but they call him the mayor, because he liaises with the various gang members and leaders on the outside, plus the prison guards, plus the local police. And basically, he maintains a stable, uneasy truce, effectively, so that the prison system works and that things all don't collapse in there and it doesn't turn to chaos. And he does that by wheeling and dealing, and there's, the guards have deals they make with the prisoners, with the gang leaders to get what they want, and vice versa. And everyone it's this kingdom he rules over as the mayor. They call him the mayor. And he's the fixer. He's the guy who makes everything happen. Jeremy Renner is great. Phenomenal. Taylor Sheridan, again. This Mayor of Kingstown, I think, is better than 1883. I think the writing is better overall than even Yellowstone. If you haven't seen this, you should watch it. The musical scoring of it is great. Really great musical scoring of it. It has it reminds me there's sort of shades of Thomas Newman in this TV series musical scoring. The musical scoring of this TV series, Mayor of Kingstown. It is just great. One thing that this show really establishes, I think, is that Taylor Sheridan, generally speaking, he can write men pretty well. He writes male characters. He writes male characters for men who actually care about and love their masculinity. And I think that's interesting. He writes, he presents these characters who have a more masculine edge, an authentically masculine edge. Now, sometimes that gets the better of them, and they become, they need to sort of crib back the excess, but they are men who want to win at things, who want to compete, who see themselves as life as a challenge. It's very much the characters that he writes, and he writes them well. There is one thing, though, that is starting to become a bit apparent, and that, for me anyway, is that nihilism is a bit of a flaw in his characters. It's consistently cropping up now, this nihilistic approach to and vision of reality that we see in Taylor Sheridan's characterizations. There is no God, there is no meaning, it's just a struggle, and you've got to fight for what you can get, and it's sort of that theme keeps cropping up. And it's in this one again, the nihilism. I find it frustrating. It's a shame, because he writes these really good characters, and then all of a sudden you get this moment of this sort of the darkness of nihilism that descends upon them. But basically, he's knocked it out of the park. This show, Mayor of Kingstown, it's phenomenal. The story is great. I love the story concept is excellent. And the way it's built up over the series is really good as well. It gives it a chance to unpack everything. And what this TV series for me has really shown is that Taylor Sheridan is really quite a rare talent in today's modern film and television writing environment. He is able to, and he's doing both at the same time, writing phenomenal films like Sicario, and then he's able to write phenomenal television as well. And he's just in both arenas, he's doing it well. And I think a big part of it is that it seems to me he focuses really on characters and sort of the drama of what's going on, and he does that really well. I love the plot device in this TV series, Mayor of Kingstown, with the bear. I won't spoil it for anybody. I'm not going to put too many spoilers in this one, because I think you should go and watch it if you haven't seen it. But the plot device with the bear, there's a bear, it's not a gag, there's a running appearance throughout the series of a bear in a forest setting. And I won't tell you any more, but that bear is very important. It's very symbolic. The character who keeps engaging with the bear is a character who effectively is engaging with real human bears who will turn on you, who seem like your friends, but in an instant, so if you keep feeding them, they keep coming back for more, and eventually if you don't give them what they want and they're hungry enough, they'll attack you. And that's a great metaphor for this character and their dealings with other human beings on the show. So that was a great plot device, I thought. There's some interesting messaging in this. There seems to be a little, it's not huge in the series, but there seems to be an anti-death penalty message. I appreciate that. I'm not a big fan of the modern death penalty. I think there's other ways of dealing with even the worst of criminal offenders. We can keep people safe, and I think the risk is too great of executing innocent people in the process. So I think if we don't need to use it to keep ourselves safe, I'm not convinced we should. That's a whole other story for another day. But that there seems to be a little bit of that. It's not huge. There's one episode, really, in particular. There's a scene in an episode where a criminal is executed, and they have the scene. He's very well written, too, where people come to watch the execution, and it all unfolds. And it's not, here's the thing, too, it's not heavy-handed. No one in that scene is saying to you, the death penalty is bad, and you should be opposed to the death penalty. It shows you the death penalty worked out in the real world, and then it leaves you to draw your own conclusion. Which I'm fine with that. That to me, that's how good artistic endeavors happen, as opposed to here's an idea I'm going to hit you on the head with, bang, 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 bang. Did you get it? If you didn't get it, you're a bad, evil racist, right? Which you get a lot of today. There's a little bit of cultural Marxism in here, though. I've noticed this is a thing with Taylor Sheridan. There is a little bit of it when he talks about the history and stuff. It tends to be one-way traffic. White man bad. Other people were noble savages who had harm done to them by the white man. But there's no concept of the glories of both cultures and the sins of both cultures. It's just one sinful, one glorious, typical cultural Marxist fear. And I also think it's funny, the human dignity of the prisoners got lost a little bit, but then it recovers itself in the final episode. And it's funny, it touches on that theme in the final episode in quite a major and very serious way about the human dignity of the prisoners. But it's it's like a moment that suddenly arises, like it's a new theme. They've introduced at the very final episode this new theme of the human dignity of prisoners and how they are treated in the system. It's like, that's true. Good point, but it would have been nice if you'd started developing that point earlier on. Like not suddenly just had a character who literally narrates that point, who gives us the exposition. Here's the thing, though. Mayor of Kingstown, if you haven't seen it, it deserves every single bit of the 8.2 that it's got. Well, it did have an 8.2 when I looked a couple of nights ago on IMDb. It's got an 8.2 rating. I think it should have higher than that, actually, but 8.2 is pretty good. And it deserves every single bit of it. It's a sleeper TV series. I hadn't heard a thing about this. I didn't even know it existed. I didn't know Taylor Sheridan was involved. Maybe that's because I'm getting old and curmudgeonly, and I don't watch the old internet as much as I used to find out what's happening. And I suddenly discover one day on Amazon, there's a new TV series. Put the slippers on, light the pipe, because that's what you do when you're old. And I watched a bit of TV. And so I discovered it by accident, purely by accident. And I haven't heard anyone else talking about it. Mayor of Kingstown. It is it's a sleeper hit. I think once people become aware of the show, they're going to go, man, that is really good. It's really, really good. And you'll hear a lot more about it. But if you haven't watched it, well worth the watch. Right, moving right along. The Invisible Pilot. The Invisible Pilot, HBO documentary series. I noticed HBO, Friday morning, struggling to get my words out. HBO. Take a little sip, shall I? Just water. HBO are doing a few more documentaries now. They've obviously got a new production arm where they're putting some money into some documentaries, and some are okay, some are... But The Invisible Pilot, this was... there were things I liked and things I didn't like about this documentary. So if you don't know the story, and I won't spoil it for you, it's a true story, obviously. There's a great twist, and I didn't know the story. And so I sit down, watch this documentary, and I'm thinking, okay, event A has happened, event B has happened, great tragedy. Everyone's reminiscing on the tragedy, trying to understand who the character was, involved in the tragedy, all that kind of stuff. And then, boomfa, massive, unexpected plot twist. What? It's not what I thought it was. And the documentary sort of shifts gear a little bit. And that was great. And so I liked that aspect of it. And the fact that it was filmed over, I guess the director must have had 3 different attempts at producing a documentary about the story. He's a friend of the people involved. And so there's 3 different time periods where the interviews come from. So he's interviewed them over at three different occasions over a period of, a couple of decades, I think, in total. And so that's quite interesting. Same character telling on camera from 20 years ago, then 10, and then today. It's quite interesting talking about the exact same events. But this documentary ended up turning into, and very quickly turned into, a man without virtue, who's the main topic or subject or focus of this documentary, who's trying to give moral justifications for his selfish immorality. I won't spoil it for you anymore, but I was really disappointed, and then I was like, yeah, sure. So it was this whole thing of, man, I'm the system is corrupt, and I'm fighting the corrupt system. And it's like, are you really, though? And then by the end you realize, no, he's not. He's just a selfish individual who abandoned his family, actually, and lived a life without much in the way of virtue. And his criminal behaviours were very much a reflection of his lack of virtue. But he's tried to paint them as, I was on the front lines of fighting the war for humanity. I was fighting for the little people against the man. And I was like, no, you weren't. You're making a ton of money. Doing something that you enjoy doing quite clearly as the documentary develops. So that bit I found frustrating in the end. It's like, but yeah, interesting. If you got a spare Sunday afternoon or a rainy day or something, it could be worth a watch. Moving right along, the Pentaverate. I promised you we're trying to keep this show snappy today, so I can get to the main topic and we can get on with this thing. The Pentaverate. I watched the Pentaverate, the Mike Myers show. The reviews of the show, which have basically said, it's blah, they are right. They are absolutely right. This show is, it's average. It's middling to average at best. That's at best. Basically, effectively, overall, I'd call it an X-rated Mike Myers skit. And if you've had enough of Mike Myers skits, then you're not going to enjoy this a lot. There's sort of one or two moments where you have a little bit of a chuckle, but not much. It's Mike Myers playing so many characters, some of whom you're like, well, why is he playing this character? Like the series actually is just not strong. It's not engaging. The story's not enjoyable. The main message was bizarre. Secret societies are great, and we should trust the experts without question, and anybody who questions the experts is the problem. The message. Yeah, garbage, basically. I mean, honestly, wow. So stunning and brave of you to tackle the big issues of the day and really step out on a limb and challenge the cultural norms and go countercultural with your big budget Netflix TV series. No, doesn't do that at all. Actually comes out as a defender of the status quo. Hey kids, secret societies are awesome and the experts are amazing, and whatever they say, you should absolutely trust and believe without question, because that's what logical people do. They know that people in authority tell the truth, they're infallible, and they never make mistakes. Right? Huh? Those internet guys are bad. It was like, wow, so stunning, so brave. Yes. Andrew, good point. Andrew says a lot of criminals who are the subject of documentaries have been given a platform recently, like that guy from The Staircase. I will talk about The Staircase because I knew that story before I watched The Staircase. I'm watching it each week. Once that's finished, maybe next month we'll be able to talk about The Staircase, because I watched the documentaries about that case. And I have some pretty clear, based on the evidence, I don't think there's much of a quibble unless you want to believe the owl theory. And there's things about the owl theory that seem interesting at first, but then you're like, that doesn't quite make sense either. That we'll talk more about The Staircase next month. But the Pentaverate, Mike Myers. It's basically just, without the Mike Myers shtick, which is Mike Myers doing all these different characters at the same time in the series, this thing there's nothing to pull it together. The story is, the message is hopeless. The story is paper thin. It's literally a save the world, stop the bad guys type story. There's nothing great about the show. The only thing that would draw you in to watch this, and the only thing it's got going for it, is the Mike Myers shtick. The fact that Mike Myers is doing several or multiple different characters. I think this might be the most different characters he's done in the same production, isn't it? Like even Austin Powers, what was it? Only one or two different, three different characters? Four different characters. I'm just trying to think of all the characters he played in that were in the same production, the same story. So it was four, wasn't it? So there's there's Dr. Evil, there's Goldmember, there's Austin Powers, there's Fat Bastard. That's it, isn't it? I know too much about Austin Powers, don't I? But this one, he's doing even more than that, isn't he? I'm just trying to think in the Pentaverate. But yeah, he's doing what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 characters, maybe even more. But it was just, and that shtick just doesn't work. Some of the scenes were just laughable in this. The scene with the Shrek. What the heck was that about? The Shrek and the Bigfoot. It was like, honestly, it was like an old Benny Hill. Or if you remember The Goodies, it was like something out of The Goodies, the British TV show. And there were 1 or 2 shots where, because obviously Mike Myers, he's playing multiple characters, and these characters have to interact with each other. And so there's some scenes where they're on screen at the same time, and some of those scenes are laughable. Like the body double work and the camera shot selection is just, it's quite obviously Mike Myers talking to not Mike Myers. And then we flick back to the other perspective and it's Mike Myers talking to not Mike Myers, pretending to be the guy you've just seen, who was Mike Myers. Yeah. The Pentaverate, don't recommend it. If you want to subject yourself to a lot of time for very minimal payback, then watch the Pentaverate. But if you want to live your life and get on with it, don't waste your time on the Pentaverate. I would not recommend it. Okay, moving right along. SuperNature. Has anybody seen SuperNature? Ricky Gervais's new comedy special. Overall, I would say this. I want to talk about the controversy surrounding it in just a second, but overall, I would say this. It was okay. It was okay. It wasn't memorable. It wasn't the greatest thing that Ricky Gervais has done. It's okay, it doesn't have to be. It was just like it's another comedy special. There's a bit of rehashing of some of the same ideas and philosophies he's presented before. One thing I have to say is this, that as a person of faith myself, I was quite appreciative of the fact that this was a comedy special where he actually showed a more conciliatory attitude towards religious believers than I've ever seen from him, actually, in anything, just about anything. I mean, he clearly nails his atheist stripes to the wall, but at the same time, he also actually threw a bit of a bone to us religious believers. And he sort of, he said, I don't mind you praying and you believe in what you want to believe, but here's the thing. And the joke that he built around that too was actually quite reasonable, and I totally agree with him. And what you'd find is the vast overwhelming majority of sane, rational religious believers who have what we call fides et ratio, faith and reason together, which is what authentic Christianity always has at its heart, you'll appreciate the joke that he tells there about where he talks about, pray to whatever God you want to, but don't stop doing the chemo. And that was it's spot on. He's right. And as I said, faith and reason together, the beautiful Judeo-Christian natural law tradition would tell us that God gives us the wonderful gifts of science and medical technology and our knowledge of the natural world to help human flourishing. And whenever those things are put at the service of human flourishing, good things happen. Evil happens when those objects, they produce technologies and behaviors, our science and our technology, and that knowledge is used to subjugate human persons or turn human persons into objects. And so that we use and dispose of at will. But when it's put at our flourishing, like chemotherapy, that's a really good thing. And we recognize that that's a gift from God. The people who came up with it were gifted and had their charisms gifted by God, and the beauty of and importance of what they gave to humanity, that therapy is really important. And so people like me will laugh at that joke, where somebody says, believe and pray to whatever God you want to, but don't stop the chemotherapy as well. And that's spot on. But so more conciliatory, I thought, the tone overall. But it's not memorable. It's not, you're not going to walk away going, oh yeah, this was, wow, some really phenomenal new material here from Ricky Gervais. It's pretty much the same stuff that he does. Here's why, though, I think it's probably, obviously it's created controversy. And it's created controversy for some of the jokes he tells. And I'm not going to mention all of the jokes. By the way, don't forget to smash that like button. Keep reminding you to smash that like button. Helps with the algorithm. But I'm not going to mention the jokes because I don't want to find myself in trouble with the clerics at YouTube who sit there in their great clerical state. You are a heretic. You will be imprisoned. So I don't want that. So I won't tell you what the jokes are about. You probably can Google it yourself. You'll know, or you probably already know. But I think why he's... And this is what makes this possibly a little bit different, is it's probably an important political statement, really, and cultural statement, this series SuperNature, or particularly aspects of it. And in many ways, it's quite an important moment in the culture because, and it's why they've come after Ricky Gervais so ferociously. You see, normally what happens is when people critique the things that he critiques in this special, trying really hard not to get myself in trouble here, normally when people critique the things that he critiques in his SuperNature special, they are often easier to dismiss. It's not logical, it's not fair, it's not right, but people are dismissed. They say, oh, that person's a religious believer, they're a Christian, they're a conservative, whatever it is. And so they use those as ad hominem attacks. Instead of playing the ball, they attack the man. And they say, he or she is a conservative. He or she is a TERF. He or she is a Christian. Therefore, you don't have to listen to anything they say. It's a logical fallacy because their political allegiances, their philosophical approaches to life, their religious beliefs are not relevant to whether or not what they are saying about subject X is true or false. You have to test the claims they're making. That's how logic works. And so Ricky Gervais, though, you can't dismiss him on those grounds. Atheist, absolutely militant new atheist as well. Very clearly nailed that flag to the wall. He is left of centre, so you can't put him in the conservative he's right wing. You can't accuse him of that. He's got he's got big money. He's got major pulling power in the celebrity scene. And so he's a threat. And so he's not easy to dismiss. And so when someone like that stands up and says there's a problem here through the comedy the jokes that he's telling, it's quite an important moment. It's a watershed moment. And often what it does is it also empowers other people who have been a little bit afraid to speak up because they think, oh, if I speak up on this issue, I'll get called a bad name, or I'll be lumped in with those people I don't want to be lumped in with. Instead of having the courage to say, so what, just speak the truth, they don't speak up. Well, when someone like Ricky Gervais is speaking up, all of a sudden, it gives them a bit of Dutch courage as well. So that's why I think they've come after him in such a ferocious way. And it doesn't seem to be... I do wonder about the CEO of Netflix who put out that memo to the staff a couple of weeks ago telling them that they've had enough of the wokeism and everything else. I couldn't help but wonder if he did that with a very keen awareness that this Ricky Gervais special is coming up, and I'd imagine he would know what the content was of the Ricky Gervais special. And I do wonder if he was just sort of preempting, cutting off the horses at the pass, if you like, and saying, well, I'll put this out now so that when the Ricky Gervais thing drops in a week, 10 days' time or 2 weeks' time, a couple of weeks' time, however long it was, we will have already done a little bit of the groundwork, a bit of the spade work, as they say. So, yeah, that was SuperNature. Not hugely memorable, nothing I'm going to recommend to people and say, wow, it was amazing, it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. It's just sort of pretty average. As Jason Rasmussen says, watched it for... Sorry, Jason, I don't know why you're not up here. There we go. Watched it for 10 minutes. Stopped. Jedi Dick Sensei says, great name, by the way, there's never been a sadness that cannot be cured by breakfast food. My wife would agree with you there, Jedi. That is a wise piece of wisdom. I don't eat breakfast. But my wife is a big fan of the breakfast food, and often if we go out every now and then, we're lucky we get out for a little date night together. She doesn't mind discovering a restaurant that does breakfast for dinner. And at our place, the kids love it too. Every now and then we do breakfast for dinner. It's a big deal in our family. They love it. Okay, let's move on. Severance. Has anyone seen Severance? Not the movie. Was it Danny Dyer who was in the British movie? I saw it when that came out years ago. B-grade movie called Severance. About a group of people who go on a work wilderness experience. So it's like a team building thing for work, but there's a real psychopath hunting them, killing them off one at a time. So that it's not that one. I'm talking about the new TV series on Apple TV, Severance. Yeah, gosh, it is great. I'd have to say I really, really, really like Severance. I love Severance. It is great science fiction, really excellent science fiction. And I have to say, Ben Stiller, impressive. Ben Stiller, I didn't not know that he had these sort of directing chops, but he really shows with Severance that he's got a great eye for this and clearly got a talent. So I'm quite impressed by Severance. I love the stylistic look and work and feel of this TV series, this world that these characters inhabit. It's really great. Everything about it, right from the opening credits. I love the opening credits and that little staticky interference, but at the very end of the opening credits where the two characters suddenly merge together. The concept, I think, is excellent. Excellent concept. I was sort of racking my brains the other day thinking about this, and I couldn't think of anything else that had done this concept before that I could remember, but I'm sure that's not true. But I really like it, the concept of you get an implant in the brain, and this is not a spoiler because it's in the trailer. You get an implant in the brain whereby as soon as you walk through the doors of your office, your workplace, you are severed from your old life, and you can't remember who you are on the outside. And there's a second part of your brain, effectively two persons in one. And you all of a sudden, it's like waking up in the office. And the second person comes to life, and all their memories are in the office or at your workplace. And then when you leave the workplace at night and walk through the door and get on the outside world, you go back to forgetting everything that happened in the office, and you only remember stuff on the outside world. So two different lives that are being lived. The concept is excellent. Really excellent concept, and I like where it's heading. It'll be interesting to see if they can sustain the momentum in season 3, and there's some really interesting little things that they do, concepts, and the way they play with this concept of memory and not knowing who you are on the outside. It's great. There's some little things. The characters sitting there talking to each other about, I wonder what I'm like on the outside world, because they don't know, right? They're not in touch with those memories. And so they have these sort of fantasies about who they are or what's going on the outside world and what's the work that they're doing. And yeah, it's good. It's good. One character who, and I thought this was really, really well done, who tries to take her own life as she's leaving work. And so it's a very clever concept. It's her, the work self. They call them innies. The innie, the work version of herself, is trying to get revenge on the outside version of herself, because the outside version of herself won't let her out of the severance procedure. She wants out. And so she doesn't understand why. And so she tries to take her own life as she's leaving work. And of course she crosses over, and she's in an elevator, and she gets to a certain point where the door's open, and it's the outside self suddenly is like hanging from the ceiling and doesn't know why. So they play with the concept, I think, really, really well. Ryan says, who's just joined us, I just joined a few minutes ago, scrubbed back to check, but didn't see anything. Has Obi-Wan Kenobi show been discussed, or another stream for that? Ryan, I haven't talked about Taika Waititi yet. I will briefly mention Obi-Wan, but I want to talk about Obi-Wan Kenobi, I think, next month, once the whole series is wrapped up. But I am going to briefly mention that in passing when we get to Taika Waititi in just a minute. Great to have you with us, by the way. Ben Stiller, great directing, stylistic. I love it. The concept is excellent. And all I'll say is, to wrap this up on Severance, is please don't stuff up season 2. Same thing for Mayor of Kingstown. Please don't stuff up season 2. I think there's a great concept here, and it's going to be really, really good. Okay, moving right along. 2 more things, and then we want to talk about Taika Waititi. The first is The Northman. I watched The Northman. Several people said to me, you should watch The Northman, and I'd seen some glowing reviews online of it. Here's what I think. I think this film is worthy of the hype. It's a good film. I liked it. I enjoyed it. Is it the greatest thing ever made? No, but it's refreshing. In a time of too much sort of average superhero schlock, which is what even Marvel's turning into now. It's turning into average superhero schlock and wokeism up to the hilt. This was actually really refreshing. It's just a good, well-told story. It's not overcomplicated. Tells its story well. It has some interesting points of contention. Can you really live a life dedicated to revenge? Is that really, truly a good thing? Who's the baddie in all of this? Who's the goodie? It's good. I noticed some people critique the mystical elements, the surreal elements of it, and they said, I wasn't sure whether you were supposed to take the surreal elements as being real or not. I just didn't have an issue with that. And I wonder if that's, because for me as a person of faith, mysticism is quite normal. I'm a Catholic. And so we have quite what we would call a sacramental worldview where what we do with our bodies and everything sort of speaks to invisible realities, and there's great symbolism in the Christian scriptures, and you see typology and different things playing out, and metaphors are quite common in theology and theological thinking. So when I watch a film like this, I'm like, I didn't see a split or a divide here. It's like, they're doing that surreal stuff again. Ugh. It was just like, they're just mystical expressions of what's really happening in the story. To me, it didn't, and there was no need to even ask the question, was this real or was he dreaming? You don't need, I think when you've got a sacramental worldview, you don't ask that question because you don't need to. It's like it's all part of the total holistic package of who this character is and the lens through which he sees the world and his mission and everything else. It's to me, it's just sort of an insight into his mind. So some people I know sort of struggle with that, but I just didn't. For me, it's fine. I didn't think it was too simplistic. I heard some commentary saying, it's a bit simplistic. I was like, I don't think it was. It's straightforward. Simple story and simple storyline. It's not overly complicated, but I wouldn't call it simplistic at all. He didn't sit down with his latte and talk about geopolitics and Bitcoin and the politics of Elon Musk. No, it's not what it is. But it wasn't simplistic. One thing I have to say too, I quite liked was it's great to actually see a more historically accurate presentation of the Vikings. The Vikings were some bad dudes before they were Christianized. They were some bad dudes. Their behavior, you did not want to see the Vikings landing on your shore. The people at Lindisfarne were not happy to see the Vikings arrive. And one thing that I've seen of other portrayals of late of the Vikings is this sort of weird attempt to represent them in a historically inaccurate way. They were very noble people and they had this proto-democracy going on here. It's like, no. They were a command and conquer society. That's what they were. And there's plenty of things we can look at and go, wow, that's impressive. But we have to be honest about who they were. And this TV series does that. That scene where they go into that village, and it's at the very start where they attack and pillage, and there's implied rape, obviously. They don't show those scenes, but it's all there, it's implied. Not only is that cinematically very well shot, but it's a very confronting and truthful presentation of what that history and those characters, those peoples were like in their conquering behaviours. And so, it was good to see a more historically accurate presentation of that, I think. It didn't pass any judgment on it, but it just presented it for what it was. So recommend it. Josie says, great to have you with us, Josie. Says, have you kept up on Critical Drinker's great series of videos on why modern Hollywood sucks? Yes, I think Critical Drinker is one of the best commentary, entertainment commentary exponents on YouTube right now. I don't say that lightly. I'm in awe of his commentary because I like it. I think he brings real depth to it. And so much of it's on point. Don't always agree with his takes on certain films and stuff like everything in his takes. But I think I find myself agreeing with 90% of his stuff. And more importantly, his approach to it is very well considered. So if you haven't watched Critical Drinker's stuff, I'd highly recommend it. Often I'll tweet at him and tell him. I'm not sure if he's seeing all my tweets, but I have a certain affinity with him as well. He's a Scotsman. I'm Irish by heritage. I enjoy a good whiskey. I think he enjoys a good bottle of whiskey. And so there's a bit of a Celtic affinity there between the two of us. That I feel anyway. And so I was drawn to his content a little bit like that at first. But it's great content. It's really good. And if you haven't watched Critical Drinker stuff, I'd recommend it. His take on, he's got a really good and some good deep analysis in places of things. So yeah. So yes, Josie, I have. Grant says, not sure if you've done so already, would love your opinion on Top Gun. Everyone seems to love it. I have heard so many, and people have been messaging me that I haven't heard from in ages saying, oh my gosh, I just went and saw Top Gun, you should definitely go and see it. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm thinking I'll try and get to it in the next week or two. And so next month, on next month's episode, which is Friday the 1st of July of Left Foot Live, I will do my best to have watched Top Gun so we can talk about Top Gun. Because, Grant, I've heard a lot about it. But I don't know. I'm assuming you haven't seen it based on your comment, Grant. That, but if you've seen it, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. That was the Northman. Northman was great. I love the Northman. Enjoyable. If you haven't seen the Northman, it's a great film. I would recommend it. Not for the squeamish. I wouldn't call it. It's definitely not a family movie night. I know some people were a bit frustrated by the choice of like Nicole Kidman and who else is in it? Who's the other guy? I can see his face and I can't even think of his name. That's so classic. It escapes my mind. But anyway, Nicole Kidman, not Kidman. Nicole Kidman is in it, and people are like, oh, I thought so. I know someone was sort of like a couple of people I've heard saying, oh, I thought it was it was an odd choice, a casting choice. I didn't. I thought she was good in it. I thought she worked well. I'll tell you why I thought she worked well is because Nicole Kidman is an actress with gravitas off the screen. So in some ways you'd say like Hollywood royalty. She's made some pretty impressive films, some not so flash, but she in her filmography there's some very big and important Oscar notable films. And she was married to Mr. Cruise. Albeit it ended terribly, but she was married to Tom Cruise. She sort of got a bit of the Hollywood royalty about it, and so it would make sense that someone with a bit of that Hollywood royalty would be playing the royal Queen Mother, right? That's the role she's playing in this. It's she is the royal ruling matriarch, and so it makes sense. I thought she was good. I really, that's Willem Dafoe. Willem Dafoe. I'm somewhat of a Willem Dafoe expert myself. Get it? If you know the meme, you'll get it. I'm not going to explain it. It's not dad joke time. Grant says, I have seen it, Top Gun. So Maverick, loved it, going to see it again on Sunday. Okay, so you're giving it the big thumbs up then. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'm trying to keep my expectations low because in the past what I've done is I've hyped up my expectations, gone into a film and be like, hey, it was okay. And then you watch it a second time, a couple of months later without the expectations and you're like, yeah, that was really good. But I set my bar so high that it didn't deliver. I talked it up too much in my mind, too much anticipation, and it's hard to live up to. Jason Rasmussen says, Mr. Plinkett paved the way for Critical Drinker. You're right, Mr. Plinkett did pave the way for Critical Drinker, and I think Mr. Plinkett paved the way for a lot of online commentary. There's no doubt in my mind, and I see it time and time again, certain jokes and mannerisms that people do in their movie reviews, and what are they? They are clearly influenced by Mr. Plinkett. You cannot underestimate. I think it's quite interesting that they are. I think they, despite the fact they've got a huge audience, I think their influence and impact on movie and film and television commentary on YouTube in particular. Jay and Rich and Mike, the Red Letter Media guys. Their influence is just it's huge. I think it's underappreciated. And I see it, there's a new generation now coming through who clearly have got picked up mannerisms that they maybe don't even know where they've come from. They may have not even watched the Mr. Plinkett review, but they've watched other reviewers and picked up mannerisms and ways of doing and speaking and doing things in their movie commentary and stuff like that they've picked up from Red Letter Media via the parties who started imitating Red Letter Media. Very, very interesting, eh? I will watch Red Letter Media, anything Red Letter Media do, and I've been watching them for a very, very long time. Before the Mr. Plinkett reviews were even famous, before they were even like a huge thing that were widely known about. And it's just great, solid stuff. Yeah, you're absolutely right, though, about Mr. Plinkett and Critical Drinker. And I think anyone who's in doing movie commentary in that sort of space who creates characters and Anyway, so before we talk about Star Wars, we're almost there. So that was Northman. Love the Northman. Album of the month. I've got an album. I promised you each month I'm going to do an album of the month that I want to talk about. This month's album was supposed to be last month's album, but I forgot to bring it in the office with me. I have it now with me. It is this album here. I might have to take it out of the sleeve, actually. Leave the LP in the sleeve. Why is that doing that green screen for some reason? See, that's picking up on something, so I'll take that out of the sleeve. This album is Yazoo. I hope you can see that. I'll put it in front of me here. Yazoo. I don't know if that's made it better, actually. Upstairs at Eric's. This is a phenomenal album. And if you haven't heard this album, you should, just for the sake of giving it a listen. This is one of the big all-time important albums in particularly modern musical history. But I don't think it gets as much kudos as it should, or it doesn't get talked about as much as it should. You know, music lovers will talk about it, but this is a really, really important album. This is something that released in 1982. So 40 years old this year, this album. That's how old this is. You can hear it on Spotify, though. Well worth tuning in for. So it's Upstairs at Eric's is the album by Yazoo, who are an English pop synth duo. I'm going to put it back in its cover because I get nervous when these things are... No, I won't. I'll leave it there for a second. Are out of their cover. But English synth pop duo. So you've got Vince Clarke, who anyone who knows about synth pop and the history of it will know that he was a former member of Depeche Mode. And Depeche Mode, one of those big important synth bands of the 80s. So Vince Clarke is doing keyboards on this album, and Alison Moyet does the vocals. Alison Moyet, if you were around in the 80s, you'll remember Alison Moyet because she had a very successful independent solo career as well. And she released a couple of pretty solid albums that are in my vinyl collection as well. And she had some big hits. But this album's different. And this is the album, I think, to listen to Alison Moyet on. If you want to get a real appreciation for just how good a vocalist and what she brings, this is the album to listen to as opposed to her solo albums. So Alison Moyet on vocals. It's released in 1982. It's 40 years old this year. It was a debut album, but there were several big hits that came from this album. If you're not feeling this album, so you start listening to it and you go, no, Brendan, I'm not really feeling this album. Why is there so much hype about this album? Why do people talk about Yazoo, Upstairs at Eric's, people who love it the way they do? I would say to you, if you're on Spotify, skip to track number 6. Track number 6 is called Only You. It's if you've got the vinyl version, it's the first track on side 2. The great thing about this, by the way, is it was re-released a few years ago, so you can still get it. You can actually get new copies of it, which is good. As long as you can find a record supplier that's selling it, you can get it new, which is good. Well worth having this album in your collection. Particularly if you collect vinyl, it doesn't matter. Get it on CD. If you can get it on CD, add it to your Spotify playlist. But track number 6 called Only You. Skip to that track and play Only You. If you are familiar with the British version of the television series The Office, so the Ricky Gervais, who we were talking about earlier, excuse me, just as I try my best here to fumble this vinyl. And he does it wrong. So I'm going to have to... Typical. Never do this on live TV. Here we go. Slotted in correctly, as you should with your vinyls. So if you are familiar with the British version of The Office, which was the first one, Ricky Gervais, the American one was a copy of it, but good in its own right, by the way. The American version of The Office was great and really took The Office to a whole other level and did its own unique things with it. But if you're familiar with the British version of The Office with Ricky Gervais, you will know the track on the track number 6 on this Yazoo album, Only You. It is played in the finale of The Office, the second part 2 of the Christmas special that wrapped up the whole story. And Only You is perfectly chosen. I'm assuming Ricky Gervais chose to use that song in that scene, which concludes the whole story. Perfectly chosen track. And Only You is a great track. It is just a great track. But it's not just Only You. There are other tracks where you hear Alison Moyet's vocals. They're really, as I said, the vocal performance on this is the one to listen to if you want to really get an appreciation for Alison Moyet. And basically as well, this is, sorry for the all the sheen on the plastic, but this is a phenomenal vinyl album as well. If you are someone who's starting to get into vinyl or you're adding vinyl to your collection, have a listen on YouTube, and if you think, I quite like those songs, this would be one to add to your vinyl collection. and you can get, as I said, it was re-released a few years ago, so it's available, and 1982. So the 80s were a good era for vinyl. Things got a bit hinky for vinyl in the 90s. So that's the time period where you've got to be careful of, because vinyl was kind of out of flavour basically by the mid-90s really, and it was CDs were all the rage. And so often the vinyl that was pressed was pretty average pressings of albums through the 90s. Thankfully they're going back now and they are correcting the record. And no pun intended, but they're correcting the record and they are producing, they're re-releasing and remastering albums, vinyl albums from the 90s that were not well done at the time because people weren't buying vinyl, so they didn't think they needed to put that much effort and attention into it. But it's a great example. I've got a remastered version of Counting Crows, August and Everything Else. Great album. And they produced a version on 2 vinyls. Normally it'd be a one vinyl album, but it's 2 vinyls, and it's mastered at half speed, and you've got 2 or 3 tracks each side, and when they master at half speed, you use more of the space on the actual surface of the record. I'm sure I might be talking to the choir here. I don't know if I'm preaching to the choir, but the surface on the space here on the record itself, the vinyl. So instead of having say 4, 5, 6 tracks, by the way, if you're buying albums. If an album's got 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 tracks on one side, the quality is probably not going to be that good. Why? Because to get that many different tracks on one side of an album, you have to compress them together tighter. And when you do that, you don't cut the vinyl as well. I know this is a very simplistic way of speaking about it, but the quality is not as good. You have to sacrifice quality to cram more on. So August and Everything Else, you got 1, 2, 3 tracks, and they're a lot more spread out and mastered at half speed, so you get a better quality. This is not one of those 90s albums though. This was an 80s album. So the original mastering was good, and the re-release version is great. So it's a good album to have in your vinyl collection because it's like an enjoyable one to listen to. There are some things I've discovered as I've really built my vinyl collection, is that there are some things that are actually more enjoyable to listen to, or you just have in your vinyl collection because they're so great to listen to on vinyl. Even old second-hand vinyl that has a little bit of the pop and the crackle to it every now and then. They're just the way they were mastered is... By the way, another album that I'd recommend adding to your collection, this is suddenly turned into a vinyl show, but if you're starting your collection and you think, I wonder what I should add next, make sure that you get Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits. Absolutely must-have album. I've got the audiophile version, or an audiophile version of it, which is over 2 LPs, again, mastered over 2 LPs. But any version of that album you can get your hands on, even the single LP version, is phenomenally mastered. There's a reason why, if you go into hi-fi shops and you say, I'm interested in buying a record player and a home theater system, but I want a record player, and can you show me how these different systems sound? There's a reason why they go and get a record. A lot of places do. Get a copy of Dire Straits, Brothers in Arms, and put it on the record player for you to listen to. Because it is a phenomenally well-mastered album. Absolutely amazing. And you should have it in your collection. You absolutely should have it. Some great tracks as well on it. Some great songs on it, of course, but yeah, well mastered. But yeah, as I said, I've discovered some things are just great to have in your collection because of the mastering of the record, and some things just, excuse me, they're just a bit more enjoyable to listen to on vinyl as opposed to Spotify. There's a bit of an experience that goes with it. So yeah, Yazoo, Upstairs at Eric's. That's my album of the month. We'll have something different next month. And well worth checking out if you haven't heard it. Maybe if you're not sure, you're not getting into it, not feeling it, start with track number 6. Okay. Here we go. A couple of comments I've missed before we get into Star Wars. Jason Rasmussen says, Joseph Kosinski is a fantastic director. Tron Legacy had a few rough edges, but a strong vision. Oblivion confirmed his talent even further. Look, I agree with you. And I never understood the hate for Tron Legacy. I absolutely love it. I went to see it for the first time on my birthday when it came out. My wife, myself, and another couple we're good friends with went along. It was my birthday, and so we went to see Tron Legacy. Didn't really know anything about it. I mean, knew the original Tron from the 80s, but didn't know anything about Tron Legacy. Loved it. The couple we went with was like, yeah, it was pretty average. They didn't really like it. I loved it. Now, I've since introduced my kids to it, And they loved it. They absolutely love it. Tron Legacy is one of the films that they will, like, you could recommend movies and they go, no, seen it, no. You say Pirates of the Caribbean, the first three, they like those. Tron Legacy or Inception, they'll go, yep, watch it. Let's watch it now. They'll rewatch it over and over and over again. Absolutely love it. Yeah, Tron Legacy is a great film, and I think actually, look, you're right, it's got a few rough edges, but totally underrated movie. I'm really excited about the buzz that there's a bit of talk, rumors are going around that they're going to actually make a third one, and there's a follow-up coming. I'd really love that, but I don't know if they will be able to repeat what they had with Tron Legacy. Great movie. And by the way, if anyone wants to buy me a Christmas present, if you can manage to track down, secondhand is how you have to find it now, but if you can track down a copy of the vinyl soundtrack to Tron Legacy, it's on my watch list. It has been for several years. I've been looking for this. For whatever reason, Disney has not figured out that they could make quite a bit of money if they went and repressed that album and re-released it. But if they re-released the Tron Legacy soundtrack by Daft Punk, it's a phenomenal soundtrack. 2 LP soundtrack, not available anywhere. Secondhand, they sell for huge amounts of money. Don't have the money to pay for that. So I haven't added it to the collection. But if you manage to track down a copy and you feel like being generous, send it to me. I'll happily add it to my collection. But a phenomenal soundtrack. So yeah, Tron Legacy, great film. Josie says, my favourite Red Letter moment that became a meme was don't ask questions, just consume product, then get excited for next product. Yeah, that was on the podcast show they did, that satirising of movie podcast. That was brilliant satire, that show. And some people I don't think got it. They didn't understand that it was satire. That's a sign of good satire. Oblivion was underrated. Yeah, I agree. Our kids enjoyed that. Oblivion. Are we an effective team? That's a great film. The one thing I'd say about Oblivion though is this, and I think this is what lets Oblivion down. Oblivion ruined its ending a little bit, or undermined its ending a little bit. So you have Tom Cruise's character who engages in what is a truly heroic act of self-sacrifice, and he dies. And that's the power, that's the impact. But then they undermined that a little bit, I thought, by all of a sudden, clone version of Tom Cruise turns up at the end, remember? And I was like, oh no, it undermines his sacrifice a little bit. The impact of his sacrifice would have been stronger if he'd actually sacrificed himself, built a legacy for the future, and not shown up again at the end. So that was one thing for me that I thought was a little bit frustrating about it. But I love Oblivion. Yeah, Jason says, so much love of a father for his son in Tron Legacy, and so much love of a husband of his wife in Oblivion. Yeah, there's some good stuff in there, and it's good, solid sort of storytelling. Yeah, they were. Daft Punk, absolute geniuses. I was there in the time before. I was there. I mean, Daft Punk, man. I was playing some Daft Punk to my kids the other day, and they're like, what's this? It's pretty good. I was like, yeah, it's Daft Punk. I was there, kids. I was there when this got released around the world. Anyway, so moving right along, the main topic of today's conversation, Taika Waititi. Is he right for Star Wars? Now, by the way, I'm going to do something right now that you shouldn't ever do on live television. I'm going to disappear off screen for 2 seconds because I'm going to turn off the blimmin' heater. It's really cold. It's winter here. It's a cold morning. My office is quite cold normally. Turn on the heater to warm up and thought, I better turn that off before I start the live stream. Forgot to turn it off. So I'm going to turn it off right now. So give me 2 seconds. Talk amongst yourself, class. I'll be back soon. Promised you I wouldn't be lying, but there you go. Never ever do that. Okay, kids, that's a lesson for you. Don't ever do live streams where you walk away from the camera. The audience does not appreciate it. Okay, as much as you probably loved looking at the movie posters behind me. So, Taika Waititi and Star Wars. Here it is. Here's my thoughts on this. While we're here, please don't forget to smash that like button. I really hate saying it. It sounds so cheesy. I'm getting old, aren't I? Turning into an old man. I read, by the way, read Brideshead Revisited recently. Loved it. Highly recommend it. There's that great line in the first chapter. At 39, I began to feel old. Well, I'm past 39, folks. Yeah, and I definitely feel old. So anyway, you smash that like button. That helps with the algorithm. So please, please, please do that. So Taika Waititi, Star Wars. Okay, we're hearing talk again now. Taika Waititi, Star Wars film is coming next year. That's the talk. That's the talk. Here's the thing, though. The way I've read, or the way I've heard this being talked about in certain articles reporting on this, I wondered to myself, is this actually going to get made? Or is this going to be another Rian Johnson special? Remember Rian Johnson's trilogy? No, neither do I. No one does. Because it still hasn't appeared. The funny thing was I saw an article recently indicating that it was still a possibility. And I remember thinking, what, really? Is it? Is it though? Is it really? Are you really though? So, yeah. Is this going to be another Rian Johnson? Because I tell you why. I mean, I'm assuming this is more than the Rian Johnson trilogy, that there actually is going to be a Taika Waititi Star Wars movie. But the article I read, and maybe it was just poorly written, but the article I read about the Taika Waititi Star Wars did not sound like that was saying things like it's due for release next year, 2023. But then it was saying things like they haven't started production. There's not much. There's no explanation of the plot. And I remember thinking, it sounds a little bit sparse on details. So I'm going to assume here that they're going to make a Taika Waititi movie. Sorry, Taika Waititi. They're going to make a Taika Waititi movie. And I'm assuming it's actually happening. But I won't be surprised as well if we discover by the end of next year there hasn't been a Taika Waititi Star Wars movie, just on what I read in the article the other day. But here's what I think. I don't think Taika Waititi is actually the right fit for Star Wars. I don't. Star Wars is a complicated beast right now. Kenobi, I haven't watched episode 3 yet. I'm watching it tonight with my kids. I've been really, really busy. And so we're saving it up. Sit down Friday night, watch it together. It's okay. But that's it. It's okay. The concept is interesting-ish. There's stuff here that could be played with, but what it's looking more and more like to me anyway is that Star Wars live action is fast becoming almost like fan fiction. It's fast becoming something that isn't working. It really isn't working. It's really average, and if it wasn't for the fan service, you wouldn't watch it. Like, if you'd never heard of Star Wars, would you watch these shows and go, wow, that was just amazing? The reason that people are drawn to, and even the diehard fanatics of Kenobi and The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, which was average, I thought, the reason they're just so fanatical about it is because of the nostalgia. It's trading in on existing properties that were actually enjoyable. And so people are remembering those things, and they see the connections to those former things, and they go, wow, this thing must be amazing as well. But if you'd never heard of those former things, and I introduced you to Kenobi or the Disney Star Wars movies, like the trilogy, you'd probably go, ugh, what is this? What is this? If Star Wars had not been invented, and this was the invention of it, it would be garbage. And that's the thing. It's fast becoming apparent that they sort of, it's averaging, middling to average, as the cool kids say. So here's what I think, though. I'll talk more about Obi-Wan in a moment, just a little bit more about Obi-Wan, and I will talk in more detail about Obi-Wan once I've watched the whole series. I want to give it its due. I think it's probably not helpful to critique every episode of Obi-Wan as you go and then judge the whole series based on that, because we don't know how it'll all pan out. You can have great television series that get off to a bad start. So, I want to give them the opportunity to sort of prove themselves and see whether they can actually produce something good. But I'm not overly optimistic. But yeah, I don't think Taika Waititi, though, in the meantime, is a great fit for Star Wars. I think someone like, if they were serious about making a good family, even if you want to make it kids entertainment thing, whatever you want to frame it, if you want to make a good, solid, enjoyable piece of sci-fi fantasy escapism that is Star Wars, then you would hire someone like Matt Reeves or Christopher Nolan, to name just but two. That's who you'd be looking at, I think. Not Taika Waititi. I kind of wonder if they looked at it and said, wow, he did a pretty good job with that Thor Ragnarok thing. He's got some other good stuff under his sort of independent comedy stuff under his belt. Competent talent. Let's get him. Let's get him. Rather than, is this the most appropriate director to direct a Star Wars movie? I'm not sure he is. I mean, look, I feel like a traitor for saying this because he's a Kiwi, fellow Kiwi. Taika Waititi, he's one of us. Yeah, even though he says dumb things at times, like New Zealand was this racist, one of the most racist places, or is a really racist place to live. No, it's not, Taika. It really isn't. I get it, but yeah, not Flash. But even though I feel a bit traitorous saying this, but I'm not sure he's the right fit for Star Wars. And I'll tell you why. If you go back to the first Star Wars and you think about this, and this is what, so Taika Waititi is a bit of an auteur in that he has a sort of absurd comedy about his auteur that keeps repeating in his works. It doesn't matter. Interview with a Vampire, whether you watch the film or you watch the TV series. Thor Ragnarok, Boy. Pick a film that Taika Waititi has made. Jojo Rabbit. And you will see that same Taika Waititi absurdity in it. That absurdist, well, I would call it's probably not the correct title for it, but that absurdity, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean the comedy. It's comedy. It's good comedy. And it has an absurdity to it. The characters who are just, you know, the Taika Waititi style. So Thor Ragnarok, when that opening scene where he's being spun around on the chain, and remember he stops, oh, hold a minute, I'll come around in a second. Remember, it's absurd. And it takes you out of the story in the film, but it's fine because it's comedy, right? You laugh at the comedy moment. Now, here's the thing though, Star Wars is not a universe, is not a world, is not a story in which you have that sort of absurdist type comedy in it. It's just not. So go back to the original Star Wars, and what do you have? And funnily enough, you see, it's not just Taika Waititi, but J.J. Abrams did this as well, made a mess of this. So did Rian Johnson with the jokes that they stuck into their films in the trilogy. Remember the very first opening scenes of what was it? The Force Awakens, where Poe Dameron's like, "Right, how does this work? Do you go first? Do I go first?" It's like, what are they doing? What is this? Like literally, they are now. This is the absurdity. They are making the central premise, like Jedi powers and Jedi mind powers and the threat of a supervillain, they are turning it into an absurdity. And that's fine if you're doing comedy. Like Austin Powers is a great example of absurdity, right? Takes those concepts and they become the joke. The concepts themselves, the villain, the story, the powers, the lore. Thanks, Wise Mojo, for your super chat. Hippo character smacks his hand onto his face and looks around to see if anyone just saw what he just saw. Yeah, well put. Hi, Berlin. Great to have you. I'm just talking about Taika Waititi and why he's not a good fit for Star Wars, I don't think. So you get this absurdity where it's funny in a comedy setting. Austin Powers, the fact that Dr. Evil is an absurd villain, the fact that Austin Powers is an absurd protagonist, the fact that Fat Bastard is absurd, the fact that that Goldmember, they're all absurd, and you laugh at the absurdity of their actions and everything because it's comedy and you're supposed to. But that's not what Star Wars is. Star Wars is fantasy science fiction or science fantasy, or however you frame it, but it's an adventure tale. And in adventure tales, you don't have absurdist comedy like that makes fun of the various components that are part of the adventure tale. You do have jokes. So think about, remember sorry, just before I move on, the absurdity jokes. So we saw it with The Force Awakens. We saw it in a really bad way in Rian Johnson's The Last Jedi. Remember the Yo Mama joke? That was I couldn't believe what I was hearing when I was watching it. I really had to do a double take. It wasn't until the second time round I really confirmed, yeah, I did actually hear that. They did a Yo Mama joke in Star Wars. It was like, this just doesn't fit. And so what's happening is in those moments, they're not taking the story seriously. And that's just not what Star Wars ever was. Now, there are jokes in Star Wars, but think about the jokes in the original Star Wars. Think about Han Solo really is the comedic relief in the original one, primarily. And you also have bits of it from C-3PO and R2-D2 as well. But it's not absurdity. It's not absurdity. Think about the way those characters are and when they tell a joke. The humor that you get from those characters is appropriate to those characters. And it actually works. That's why it works. Even the cheesy stuff. Because it's not absurdity. It's not saying, oh, this is dumb, isn't it? And that's what happens when you do a Yo Mama joke in Star Wars, or when you do a who goes first? How does this work? Do I go first? Do you go first? You are making fun of the very story and its concepts when you do that. That's what you do in comedy. But it pulls you right out of the film. All of a sudden, it's no longer an engaging action-adventure piece of escapism anymore. And Taika Waititi does that well. Taika Waititi, like in Thor Ragnarok, there's plenty of those moments where the absurdity of, remember the one scene I talked about before, Thor is chained up and he's swinging slowly around? And suddenly he points out the absurdity of the fact that you wouldn't, the guy would be talking to your back half the time. And it's funny. It works in that context. It works in that film. But Star Wars, that's not what Star Wars is. It's never been like that. So when Han Solo is joking around, it's appropriate to his character. Why? And you'll notice the difference, by the way. There is definitely an arc in his character. In Star Wars, he's the rogue. He's disinterested. He's greedy. He's selfish. He doesn't take the rebellion seriously. So it's appropriate that a character who doesn't take the rebellion seriously would be joking around and we'd be laughing at his tomfoolery is enjoyable to watch. I doth love it. Right? We get a kick out of it. But it's appropriate to his character. But Luke, by the way, Han Solo, by Return of the Jedi, you'll notice something else about Han Solo. He's now more serious, but his tone has shifted considerably because he now takes the rebellion seriously, right? Now, another one is, contrast him with Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker doesn't tell jokes. He's the straight man, you could say, but it's the reason why is because it's his story and it's serious what's happening to him. And it would be inappropriate for Luke Skywalker to be cracking cynical jokes and being cynical and making us laugh because that's not who he is. That's why it's inappropriate for Poe Dameron to be cracking cynical jokes like a man who isn't really invested in the battle that he's supposedly invested in. When he sits there and goes, okay, how does this work? Who goes first? Do I go first? Do you go first? It's like, no, he'd be taking this seriously because he would understand the threat of what he's facing. He wouldn't be cracking jokes. There'd be no Yo Mama jokes. This guy is a serious defender of goodness and truth in the galaxy, supposedly fighting against the bad guys. He wouldn't be telling Yo Mama jokes. I don't know how else to say this, but, I hope I'm making sense here. So Taika Waititi does that well, but that's not what Star Wars is. By the way, I think the only movie that I think has really tonally got Star Wars right so far since they sold it to Disney is actually Rogue One. Now, it's got some flaws for sure. It's not perfect, but I think it's the best of any of the Star Wars films that Disney has released because it actually got Star Wars right. It understood that it was a serious action adventure that involved self-sacrifice, or at least the risk of self-sacrifice. And this one very much was, Rogue One, very much the theme of self-sacrifice was front and center. But it was a serious piece of escapism. You sit down, you're in the Star Wars world, it's escapist, you sit down with your kids, and there are not idiots cracking absurd jokes every 5 minutes. K2SO is funny in Rogue One because he harkens back to a little bit to like C-3PO, but imagine, I guess, a C-3PO who was had a bit more cultural and social awareness about him. And K2SO works because he's this repurposed droid who sort of serves his master but isn't as invested. And so the jokes, the humor arises out of that. It just works because it's all part of the characterization and it all makes sense. But he's not making stupid, absurdist jokes. He doesn't do a yo mama joke. He doesn't turn to one of the other characters and go, really? Really? Is he really there? Is it really there? Or what? What was that joke about the hammer? I couldn't remember the exact wording now of the joke with Korg and Thor talking about that. Was it, oh, you let your hammer pull you off? That joke. Remember that one? And my kids thankfully don't get it. And I'm going, oh, he put that in there. That reminds me of New Zealand high school years. But anyway, there's none of that in this. And it's funny in Thor and it works in Thor because of what Thor is, right? But Star Wars is not that thing. And I'm not trying to hold on to Star Wars too tightly here. I'm not trying to say, oh, no, there's only one way of doing Star Wars and that's my way. I'm the only person who knows how Star Wars can be done. And if you violate the Star Wars law, you're an evil heretic. No, and I'm not saying that. There's plenty of people can bring their own creative takes to Star Wars, but Star Wars is a type of thing. It's an action-adventure story that has fun and excitement, but it also takes itself seriously. In other words, it assumes, and that's why kids love it. Because kids watch it and they project themselves into it because it's like, wow, this is really happening, or it could really be happening, right? That's why they're drawn to it in that way. And so when it stops being that, it stops being the very thing that it is. So Taika Waititi, I think, is not consistent with that. Unless he changes his and reins himself in, I would expect a Taika Waititi Star Wars to be a Star Wars with multiple absurdist jokes that actually are all of a sudden more consistent with comedy than with action adventure. And it changes the whole tone of the thing. And I'm not sure you can do. Like, as I said, Rogue One, I think, was the only movie that I've released that's actually got it tonally correct. Solo came close, but it didn't quite hit the mark either. There's other problems with Solo, but Rogue One really, I think, got it right. Tonally, it got the action adventure. You watch Rogue One, and you're drawn into an adventure, and it's escapism, but it takes the world seriously. It says and this is what you've got to do. If you want to write good Star Wars, you've got to say, Star Wars is a real thing that I can't be cynical about. And that's what you get. You get this cynicism inserting itself into the Disney trilogy with the yo mama jokes and who goes first. It's treating the story and the concept of Star Wars with cynicism, with adult cynicism. You can't write a good Star Wars if you treat it with adult cynicism. You've got to pretend, you've got to discover your inner child and say, wow, remember what it was like to be young and imagine living the adventure that these original characters lived. How can I recapture that and put that into my story? Well, I think Rogue One got that. I think Rogue One got that right. Yeah. Berlin says, yeah, that droid, K2SO, was the best character in the film. Kind of the issue I have with it. I don't think he was, but I think there's things about Rogue One that are not great, but he was good. He was good. I don't think he's the best character. Anyway, we won't get into a discussion. Maybe there's a future episode. Who was the best character in Rogue One? I will talk about Obi-Wan next month, as I said. So my thoughts are Taika Waititi. I don't think he's the right man. I'll be happy to be proven wrong, because if I'm proven wrong, he will have reined in his usual instincts and he will have actually gone back to his childhood and living in New Zealand, discovering Star Wars. In his boyhood, he will have gone back to that and he will have made a great Star Wars film. But I am not. I think what we'll get a comedy, and maybe this is what they're looking for, a comedic take, a Thor Ragnarok comedic take on Star Wars with moments of seriousness but lots of levity. And maybe they're doing anything they can, throwing anything at the wall to try and make it stick, to try and sell a few more tickets. I don't know. And so they're thinking, well, let's give Taika Waititi a go. Let him do his thing, bring his style to it, and just let him make it, because they're desperate. I don't know. But yeah, I don't think he's necessarily a good fit. Matt Reeves, Christopher Nolan. I'd love to see Christopher Nolan get Star Wars. Gosh, I'd love to see Nolan get his hands on Star Wars. But anyway, I don't think that'll happen. But so I'll talk about Obi-Wan Kenobi next month. I want to watch all of Obi-Wan before I comment on Obi-Wan. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'm not going to talk about it now prematurely. I will say this, though. He says, I'm not going to talk about Obi-Wan, but let me talk about Obi-Wan. Based on what I'm seeing so far, I predict something is going to happen in Obi-Wan. Again, I'll be happy if I'm proved wrong. I predict that they are about to, or by the end of the series, people are talking about how they're undermining Obi-Wan Kenobi as a character. There might be a bit of that, I don't know. But I suspect what will be more of an issue is they will be undermining the legacy of Luke Skywalker as the main protagonist of Star Wars. They will be undermining, Luke's journey in A New Hope, Empire, and Return of the Jedi. And I suspect what's going to happen is Leia is suddenly going to become, no, she's actually really, really important. Possibly even more important than Luke was. But it all happened off screen, right? I have a funny feeling that's what we're going to end up with. So they're going to end up undermining Luke as protagonist. Now, they may not intend that. And possibly they don't intend it. They're just so caught up in cultural Marxism that they are insistent on promoting the message and producing propaganda that they don't care the damage they're doing, Got to have strong females. How do we do this with Star Wars, right? But I have a feeling that's what's going to happen at the end of this Obi-Wan series. The interesting thing it's really raising quite clearly in this for me, Jason says there are only 3 good Star Wars films. Well, yeah, I hope you're going to say New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. I'd let Rogue One in there as well. This raises an interesting question, actually, your point here, Jason, that there are only 3 good Star Wars films. And that is this. Can Star Wars work without Lucas? I don't think it can. Now, yes, the prequels were not great. The prequels have some pretty big problems, the Star Wars prequels, but you can't deny the fact that they were still Star Wars even though the attempt faltered and failed. And it was George Lucas, the creator, it was his vision, his creative mind was put to work on the prequels, and it really shines in that, right? But what we're seeing now looks definitely like characters and concepts in a creative experience that has been segregated from its creator and severed from its creator, very much so. Very, very much so. Ryan says, Nolan making Star Wars would be amazing, but Disney made a choice to infantilize the property. Everything feels like live-action children's cartoons. Yeah, and the funny thing is, people say, what's the matter, you man babies? This is for kids. I'm like, well, no, it's not, because it's got stuff in there that is not age-appropriate at all. But secondly, kids are not idiots. They deserve good art as well. Now, yes, you can plonk your kids down in front of stuff that's average and they won't critique it like an adult will, but you plonk a kid down in front of a really well-told story that takes them and the story seriously, and they'll love it for life. They'll absolutely love it for life. They will. So, yeah, you can feed a kid anything. That's an excuse, though. To me, that's an excuse. That's like, it doesn't matter. It's just for kids. Feed them schlock. I'm like, no, give children good art. Give them good art. I'll tell you, I've been reading through the Redwall series of books with my son, and he loves it. Really well-written stories. It's good art. And it takes the whole concept seriously. It doesn't treat him like he's a kid and just ham-fistedly jam stuff in, and it's not poor quality. It's like, it doesn't matter, it's just a kid's book. And so, because it's not like that, he loves it. Poor quality stuff he reads, he might get something out of it briefly, and then he forgets about it. Yeah, Robotic Pope says, I remember the awful Biker Scouts mistakes practice shot scene was by Taika Waititi. The Prickles had an amazing story arc, but executed very badly. Yeah, Ryan says, prediction of undermining Luke's legacy in Kenobi show sounds prophetic. It's funny. I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I really do hope I'm wrong, Ryan. But I have a feeling that's what's going to happen. Yeah, Berlin says they definitely lost my trust when it comes to letting my kids watch stuff randomly, and you're right. And I think a lot of people were lulled into that. My wife and I we always took that very seriously. Our parental obligations to be careful about what content. Look, I work in this space. You see me here once a month talking about movies, and if you watch my other YouTube stuff, but in my other work that I do, I run my own educational charitable trust, and I get out and I speak and I engage, and I do a lot of cultural work, particularly in the bioethics space. There's some pretty controversial and serious issues, and I speak in public and at conferences and stuff about these issues. And so one thing I was very aware of was that in the space of sort of ethics and sexuality, it's an absolute minefield out there and a mess. And a lot of corporates now, particularly those producing entertainment, are a reflection of that. There is a deliberate reason for this, by the way. If you know your history, you'll know that one guy who's very big on this was Antonio Gramsci. Antonio Gramsci is an Italian politician. He's a Marxist. He's one of the first cultural Marxists. He talks about this idea, Antonio Gramsci talks about this idea of how you must get hold of what he called the robes of society. So you must infiltrate the people who wear robes. Academics wear robes, so lecturers, justices, judges wear robes, politicians wear robes. So basically you need to infiltrate those institutions that form people's minds and help shape people's thinking towards our ideology, our Marxist ideology. And he was one of the first to say, and this was very much a big part of the cultural Marxist project, and you see this in the Frankfurt School as well, is this idea that they must use media as a tool to influence and shape people's beliefs and ideas. They were very big on that. So I'm not surprised to see that happening today because they're very big on that. They were deliberate about it as well. They considered, so Karl Marx claimed that religion was the opiate of the masses, and what he meant by that was it dumbed them down and kept them in a state where they were contented so they didn't rise up in violent revolution. But Karl Marx, of course, said there's supposed to be a struggle, this Hegelian struggle, thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis arises out of the struggle. In every age there's a struggle, and then a new epoch is born out of that struggle. And he said, look, the struggle of our age is the bourgeois and the proletariat, and there's going to be a new age that will dawn, and Marxism won't just happen in fits and spats of revolution around the world. It's inevitable. There will be a Marxist age. It's just going to happen. It's unavoidable. Well, it didn't happen, of course, and so they had to explain why. And so the cultural Marxists that's where they come in, and they say, oh, well, the reason the economic revolution that Marx promised didn't happen. By the way, Karl Marx, by the end of his life, was playing the stock market. So if that's how much things had changed, even in his lifetime, conditions for workers and everything had improved dramatically, such that Karl Marx felt comfortable actually buying and selling stocks in the capitalist system. So yeah, that should tell you a lot. But anyway, so the cultural Marxists come along to try and explain why Karl Marx's promised revolution never happened. Why didn't the whole world turn Marxist? And so they say, oh, it's because there's cultural Marxism afoot here. It's not just about economics. It's about thought and thought life and everything else. And so Karl Marx says religion is the opiate of the masses, keeps the masses dumbed down, stops them from fighting for their rightful revolution and taking up the rightful revolution. Then the cultural Marxists, what they say is that media is effectively the opiate. It's the new opiate of the masses. So media is the thing that keeps them dumbed down. And so we've got to take hold of media and we've got to sell them the revolution. And that's what you see. And so we're really, really cautious with our kids now. We just don't chuck anything on. We're so cautious because there's so much garbage. My wife and I were lamenting this the other night. How much rubbish and now sexualized, hypersexualized propaganda for very young children. It's like, get your filthy grooming hands off my family. Go somewhere else. Ta-ta. See you later. And funnily, our kids notice it now too. We have a family movie night together on Saturday night. We were watching something recently. And one of my kids goes, hey, Dad. And I look over and she goes, 13, just turned 13 yesterday. One of my twin daughters. And she goes, Dad, The Message. Did you hear it? And then, so anytime The Message crops up now, my older kids, they know. They can pick it out and you hear them suddenly, The Message. They yell it out from across the lounge. So, that video game show says, glad to see you talking about Star Wars again, mate. What are your thoughts on the Kenobi show? If you've seen it, I've just shared a few. Once we've finished here, that video game show, go back and check out a bit more of my comments. I'm not going to talk heaps about Kenobi until it's finished. But one thing I did say is I think my prediction is they're going to undermine the importance of Luke's role as the main protagonist by promoting Leia and turning her into an equal protagonist that all her story happened off screen. And here we are, here's her story, and she was really the important character in all of this. I predict that could be the outcome of this. But anyway, I'll talk more about maybe next month. It might be it will be finished by next month, I guess, won't it? So 1st of July I'll be back, so we'll talk more about Kenobi there. I want to wait till it's all over and then give you my wrap-up complete. I feel a little bit cautious about critiquing something before it's finished. Like I wouldn't walk out of a movie halfway through and tell you that it was bad when I hadn't seen the second act. There's something not quite right about that. Anyway, but at the moment, I think it's average. It's just okay. That's my thoughts on it. No apology necessary, that video game show. At the moment, though, I will say is my thoughts are that Obi-Wan is just a little bit average. It's average. It's not flash. And that raises the question, can you, back to what I was talking about before, can you actually do Star Wars without George Lucas? And it looks to me like you can't. Without the creator, I don't think you can do it justice. Now, people talked about Dave Filoni and said he was Lucas's successor. I was always skeptical of that. I think Dave Filoni was Mr. Clone Wars, and clearly Clone Wars was his baby, and he was good at Clone Wars, but that doesn't mean that Dave Filoni is going to make everything right again. Yeah. So I don't think Dave Filoni is the answer either. I think if they were making Clone Wars again, I suspect it would be a lot better. Yeah. Can't wait to hear your thoughts. That video game show says, a bit mixed on it personally. Yeah, that's how I feel myself, mate. I'll say this about Obi-Wan. Riva. Gosh, what another debacle, man. I mean, I don't want to be cynical, but what a mess. Anyway, I won't even talk about that. Let's not get into that. Don't be a fool. Treat other people with kindness is what I'll say. And but don't be afraid to critique bad writing. It's got nothing to do with her as an actress, but yeah. Anyway, where was I? So can you do Star Wars without Lucas? I don't know if you can. I think the Lucas magic is missing. Even though he didn't execute it well with the prequels, you still get the Lucas vibe. The sense of what Star Wars is still there. But it's totally missing now. It's very weird. It's like watching fan fiction. It really is like watching fan fiction. And I don't mean because it's really high budget fan fiction, but it's like someone paying homage to Star Wars, not doing Star Wars anymore. It feels like Star Wars is this empty shell of itself that's now just used to preach the message of the week, or for people to sort of, for lots of memberries, and nostalgia. It doesn't feel like it's a serious thing anymore. Robotics says, Pope says, I'd say much worse than average. Berlin says, I would watch a show like Firefly. It's tragic. They made so few episodes. I like that way better than any new Star Wars. Yeah, Firefly wasn't bad, was it? It came to a sudden end. I remember watching that late night and then it was, what? They've cancelled it. What? Joseph says, I have no faith in the Kevin Feige Star Wars film either. Look how the MCU is just junk food. MCU is collapsed. I'll talk about that maybe in another episode, but it is a dying star. It is a dying star. Funnily enough, I saw a meme the other day after I talked about this in the last episode, which really summed up what I was saying there. That 50 years' time, you'll have to have watched 125 movies to understand the latest Marvel movie. It's really turning into consumerist junk food, eh? Wise Mojo says, I believe you can do a good Star Wars film without George Lucas, but the people that they hired are untalented and don't care about Star Wars. There are so many brilliant, talented writers out there. Yeah, I agree. And as again, I'd say Rogue One is a pretty good Star Wars film without Lucas. So you're right. You probably can. Maybe I'm a bit harsh there. But they've got to discover that Lucas ethos. It's almost like someone's got to sit down, if they haven't done this already, sit down with Lucas and pick his brain and say, tell me about your vision for the Star Wars world, and then just make sure that everyone who writes on Star Wars is just steeped in Lucas's vision, and they get it. They understand it. Yeah. So, next month, I will talk about it. We'll be talking about Star Wars again next month, actually. But next month, I want to talk about another franchise, a different franchise, not Star Wars, but a different franchise which actually got it right and proved in getting it right, proved how badly handled Star Wars actually was. And no, it's not a Marvel franchise. But I want to talk about another franchise that proves you can actually go back to an existing property and tell new stories and do it really, really well and get it right. or largely right. No, not perfect, but, produce a good, enjoyable piece of escapism, action-adventure escapism. And this property proves that Star Wars, just how badly Star Wars got it wrong, because they failed to do that. And basically what I sort of, it feels like to me now, Disney has basically on its hand a cash cow with Star Wars, but it's a very anemic cash cow. It's skin and bones. You can see all its ribs. It doesn't look well. It's fly struck. There's flies hanging around it, and they're like, just keep milking, boys. Keep milking for all you're worth, you filthy Latin lubbers. And by the way, is Johnny Depp going to have to come back into Pirates now? That'll be interesting. Anyway, so like this cow is producing barely any milk at all now because it hasn't been nourished and looked after. And they're like, just keep milking. Just keep milking. That's what it feels like to me. So it's a bit of a tragedy, really. And one of the things that will ruin it, Star Wars, absolutely, I think the mystique of Star Wars is by turning it into a consumer product. And that's what they've done and are doing. Every week there's new Star Wars. Every month there's something new. We've got a new series coming. We've got a new movie coming. Honestly, that will ruin the mistake. One of the things when I was a kid about Star Wars was, it was so many, you had to wait several years between each film, but then there just wasn't lots of other Star Wars stuff. And the stuff that was out there was kind of average. The Christmas special, which got binned into the memory hole, but also the appearance of, I played this to my kids the other day. I remember as a young kid watching this with great excitement, watching when Luke and C-3PO and R2-D2 appeared on The Muppet Show. And I remember watching the actual episode going, wow, this is amazing. And but that was sort of it. That was about it. Celebrity guest appearances and stuff like that. But there was no other cartoons. You had the toys and the movies. And so you had great space for your imagination. And I think there was a lot of mystique. On the novels, there were some good novels too, but the mystique was there. Well, that's once you turn it into a consumer product where you're tuning out a movie of the week with Star Wars on the side of it, or a series. Here's another Star Wars series. Here's another Star Wars series. Here's we're gonna make a new series. You know this Kenobi series? It's given us a great idea. Did you see that factory he was working in? As a butcher processing the meat. We've decided we're gonna make a series about that butchery. It's gonna be great. It's going to tell a complex story of the working man's life and the struggle to free himself from the oppression of the capitalist system and to unionize. You'd be like, what? What are you doing? But it feels like that at the moment. It kind of feels like that's what they're doing with Star Wars. And well, here's an opposite take. Cream Pie Lars says, what I like about Star Wars, that they are expanding a universe without relying on other stuff. You can watch The Mandalorian without having seen any of the movies. Yes and no. I don't agree with that, cream Pie Lars. I'll tell you why I don't agree, and charitably, in disagreement, very civil here. I don't think they are expanding the universe. They're inserting stuff into a very expansive universe, but I don't know if that's the same as expanding the horizon, is it? Maybe I could be wrong about that. The thing, though, that I think they are doing is, I don't think that The Mandalorian holds up as well if you don't have a love for the original Star Wars. Without the original Star Wars, it's just a sci-fi series that the nostalgia doesn't make sense. The one thing I will say, though, about Mandalorian is you can't deny this. Baby Yoda was a stroke of genius. Absolute stroke of genius. No doubt about it. Baby Yoda is a phenomenal selling point for that show. Baby Yoda, I think, actually is more interesting and actually what makes The Mandalorian interesting. If he was just a bounty hunter going about his business, the way they've told his character, presented his character, it would not be that interesting. But Baby Yoda makes it interesting. Berlin says Star Wars isn't as expansive as it feels. You're right, but Star Wars doesn't feel. It used to feel expansive because there was all the space your mind could fill in. But once they start filling in the blanks and bringing it all back down to Earth, literally, it seems Tatooine's the only place really. It doesn't quite feel as expansive anymore. It's like, it just doesn't feel like the big adventure and set in space and all of the openness and everything. It feels so confined, tightly confined now. Funnily enough, so here's Josie. Josie says, can you imagine that Andor actually turns out to be the best of this new Star Wars factory product? I saw the trailer for Andor and I thought, wow, that's a bit different to what I was expecting. So who knows? Maybe Andor might be okay. Yeah, that video game show says, I'll second that, man. Baby Yoda is what drew me in. Yeah, for my kids, look, honestly, I know grown adult women who don't really know anything about Star Wars or Mandalorian, but they know Baby Yoda. That was a stroke of genius. My kids will watch. If you tell them, hey kids, there's a YouTube video with Baby Yoda in it, they'll watch it. Honestly, that was a brilliant stroke of genius. So whoever came up with that, well done you. You're a genius. Well done you. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Taika Waititi and Star Wars and where it's all heading. Here's a strong opinion from MSWD. I've watched 3 episodes of Kenobi. It's total rubbish, pushing Disney, Kathleen Kennedy agendas, horribly written and totally undermines Obi-Wan as a character. Yeah, it's kind of interesting, eh? I did wonder how they were going to tell his story when he's sort of supposed to be in hiding. But I guess this is the thing these days. We don't like the uncertainties, the unknowns, so we've got to fill in every blank. Yeah, but what was Obi doing? And did he have a wife? What did he do for a job? So it's like you don't need to know. But I do. We know everything until we know nothing, and it's no longer interesting. Dr. Fauci's prison part. Sorry, great handle. I haven't watched a single Disney Star Wars product since opening night of The Force Awakens. I was out as soon as the Ray slapped Finn's hand away. Plus, there's a giant George Lucas hole in the story. Yeah, I think so too. Cream Pie says, am I the only one like Solo? It was a small, fun space adventure without being all that saving the galaxy. Solo was okay, but I think Solo was plagued by the change of directors and the chopping and the carving up of the footage to save what they could. I didn't really rate Solo highly. Rogue One I thought was better. But that's just me. I know people who love Solo. They thought that it was really good. But I agree with you. What was good about Solo was it told a confined tale. I just think it didn't get it right. I don't think it'll be a cult movie in time. I don't think it will be. But we never know. I could be proved wrong. Yeah, so that's my thoughts, team. It's been awesome to be back with you, to converse with you again. Don't forget, if you become a patron with $5 or more per month, then you get access to the Dispatches Zone, the Patrons Only episode of the podcast every single week. Now, I don't do entertainment stuff there as a general rule. It's sort of more cultural and political commentary and that, but it's about 2.5 hours every episode. And it's an audio podcast available exclusively to my patrons. Alternately, if you just want to leave a tip in the tip jar, you can do that. There's a PayPal link on my YouTube homepage. Can't miss it. It says PayPal, top right. Click on that, or there's a coffee link as well in this video description. You can click there and leave a link, leave a tip and via coffee as well if you want to. All of that I really appreciate. A huge thank you to everyone who's supporting the show. The next episode of the panel, which is with National MP Simon O'Connor, who's a New Zealand MP, Member of Parliament here, and Elliot O'Kelly and myself. That'll be Monday the 13th of June. So if you're into politics and cultural stuff, well, that's what we talk about on that show. It'll be on this channel though, live. And also the next Left Foot Live, one of these where we talk about films and movies and TVs and I share my thoughts and stuff like that. And remember, next episode, I'm going to talk about a franchise that got it right. I'm going to talk about a franchise that absolutely got it right and proves that, unfortunately, Disney got it wrong with their trilogies. So that'll be part of the conversation, among other things. And hopefully we'll be able to talk about Kenobi too, because it will all be over by the end of next month, I'm pretty sure, by the 1st of July. So we can talk and I can share my thoughts on that. But that'll be the 1st of July. So we're back with another Left Foot Live on the 1st of July. You guys are awesome. Thanks for tuning in. A big thank you to all the people who are going to watch this video after the fact. You're awesome. Don't forget, leave your comments. Hit that like, please, please, please. I feel old saying this. Smash that like button like the cool young kids do. You know, you young'uns love to hit the old thumbs up. Yeah, back in my day, we couldn't put our thumbs up because it snowed so hard. And you're walking uphill 50 miles in the snow to school, and you couldn't put your thumbs up, because if you put your thumbs up, first of all, the snow was so heavy you couldn't lift your thumbs, and if you could lift your thumbs, they would freeze right off, snap right off. It was terrible. You guys don't know how lucky you've got it, so make sure you give me that thumbs up. Okay, that's my way of saying please like the video. I'm not going to Robotic Pope says any hints about which franchise. No, I'm not going to hint. You will wait. Because I think this is a guy. I haven't heard anyone else with this take. So I want to save it just in case someone else goes, hey, that's a good take. I'm going to make a video first. But the more astute people will probably guess what it is. Okay, so you guys are awesome. Thanks for tuning in. Please leave your comments as well. If you're watching this after the fact, thank you to you as well. Leave your comments. Don't forget, please, if you like the content, then please subscribe and hit that little notifications bell if you haven't already done that, and you'll get updated about all the content. I'm glad that you guys are enjoying it. Thanks to everyone who's saying thank you for the stream. I'm glad you enjoyed the stream. That's all I want to say, folks. I will see you next month, Friday the 1st of July, back on Left Foot Live. See you then. Haere rā.